Dungar Druid is a Hearthstone deck that is probably the most powerful of the Druid archetype at this current point in time. The goal of this deck is to ramp as quickly as possible and then go into high statted minions before your opponent has a chance to deal with them. This then allows you to overwhelm your opponent because of your ability to chain high attack minions, plus also control the board with Hydration Station and Ziliax and all of the other taunt minions that are involved. It allows Dungar allows you to summon multiple minions from your deck. The recruit mechanic, which Dungar is, allows you to essentially cheat a lot of mana, which is very powerful in Hearthstone. The way that you want to mulligan in this deck is you want to mulligan for your low cost spells. So you want to mulligan for Malfurion's Gift to help with ramping up with your wild growth. You also want to mulligan for Crystal Cluster, which allows you to get 3 empty mana crystals, and then you also want to make sure you're mulliganing for New Heights and Dungar. Everything else is things that you preferably would draw later out in the game. In this first gameplay footage, you'll notice that I'm playing against a hunter. This is a relatively aggressive archetype, and as I'm playing, I'm unsure really what to do against it. Obviously, I want to make sure that I'm doing my ramp, but my hand is definitely not too great to deal with quite an aggressive board that they're going to be creating. This is quite problematic because ultimately this will allow them to get a very large board, and Druid typically doesn't deal too well with large boards. It's also dealing quite a lot of damage to me at the moment as well. So what I'm thinking of here is I'm just doing my ramping strategy as best as possible. I also want to make sure that I've got enough cards that are available and think about what I'm doing in terms of the play that they have there. So obviously my game plan is a 6 cost spell, but I'm also thinking, am I even going to survive this? Is it worth conceding? So I do decide to play it out simply because I've worked out that they haven't done enough damage and things like that. And you'll notice that I just did a squelch to make sure they didn't put something like well played to try and tilt me or something. So they use Saddle Up here, which obviously is very, very powerful, especially for a deck that has such a wide board, and it's definitely not great against a Druid deck like this. I play down my Titan because I know that I can get a little bit more health back, and then I use the power to restore my health. That's the only way that I could really survive here. The next turn, I'm thinking of what I'm obviously going to be doing, and I'm more than likely going to be playing down a minion that can develop into more minions. So it's more than likely going to be the horse that I'll be playing here. But it just depends on what my hand ends up being, because Yogg could be useful, but I feel like it's not as useful as what possibly could be. I'm also holding the Stargazer until I draw into a low-cost spell to be able to get 8 armor back. They have, at the moment, I'm once again counting how much damage they have on the board to make sure that I do survive against this opponent. What I'm doing here, I do play the horse down, and then I use my hero power, and I just try and take out the minions to reduce the board size down. Hitting into the 1/1 or the 2/1 that have the have the death rattle, it would mean that the 2/1 death rattle would make it so the hunter hero power deals more, so I definitely don't want that. And then the getting rid of the 1 extra minion means that I can have a less likely chance that I'll be dealing with such a wide board for them. Them using that allows me to get some more of my minions out onto the board, and then at this point in time I'm starting to stabilize. I'm getting to the point where I will be able to stabilize the board, and I'm just waiting here to hope for a low cost spell to be able to use my Stargazer to get the buff, but also to reduce down the amount of minions that are on the opponent's board as well. They do end up getting into the 2/1 that's just there, and then they deal some more face damage to me. So with 7 health on the board, I am really hoping for something to help with healing. So what I do here is I play down this Hydration Station to get me some more taunts, and then I'll be playing down the 3 mana spell to make sure that I do get the Stargazer buff as well. So I trade here. I use obviously the better way would be to use the draw card first, because I probably wouldn't be doing anything different, but I do trade first into that minion. That's obviously a misplay that's there, and right now I'm deciding what's the least likely thing to end up dealing with my board, or what's the thing that's going to be most difficult for them to recover from. So I do decide to once again take out a minion that doesn't have the death rattle to resummon, because if they do resummon, it means that I'll be in a little bit of trouble in terms of it could end up being anything, and it could end up being something that ultimately turns me into not being able to win or anything like that. So they trade into the 4/4 here. I don't have any other minions left in my deck because they're all inside my hand, which is, you know, a little bit of an issue, but I'm just thinking now that I'm starting to gain back control of this match. They use the kill command there, which, you know, does reduce down the damage, and then they use the jungle gem. Since I've got one of my minions on the board, I am starting to get to the point where I am relatively healthy. That also was an excellent draw to be able to have as well. I play down a hydration station again. Obviously having Zilliax would be much better in this situation, but I do want to make sure that I'm getting my health back onto the board. Since I've got this big wall here of minions, I don't really have to worry too much about what they're actually going to be doing the following turns, which is the reason why I didn't use Stargazer and I used Hydration Station that turn. They are starting to get to the point where they're not going to have enough damage to deal with my board and deal with the wall minions that are being summoned. They do end up getting through this one, obviously, as you can see, but I've now got control back of the board, and I can once again summon another taunt minion if I wanted to as well. They do use their delicious treasure, but this then allows me to go into use my Yogg to be able to deal with their board since they don't have any death rattles left, and obviously that ends up winning the game for me. So I deal damage first to the opponent because I don't want to have a chance of Yogg clearing my board of the 4/4s, so I want to make sure that I can do what I can with it. End up getting an execute there, which is pretty nice to be able to deal with that. I obviously could have used swipe if I really needed to, and then I take over the board, and then I've got Feral Rage, which would give me an extra armor. Okay, so the mulligan for this deck once again is you want a mulligan for New Heights. You also want a mulligan for Malfurion's Gift. You want to make sure that you're mulliganing for the Blossom, and you're mulliganing for the 6 mana spell and Dungar. So I kept the New Heights obviously because you want to make sure you're ramping, and then I kept the Malfurion's Gift. So right now my assumption that I'm playing against for this priest is I'm thinking it's going to be one of the aggro priests, because quite often priests have been using aggro decks, and that's something that I do need to make sure that I'm accounting for. I decided to use the coin into New Heights here because sometimes I will use it, sometimes I won't, but since I've got the Innovate, I do decide to use it because the following turn, if I need to, I can always just make sure that I'm innovating. I make sure that I'm ramping as quick as possible for this deck, because you want, especially with this sort of hand, you want to be making sure that you have what you need to out relatively quickly. And since I'm unsure about what the deck that I was playing against, I needed to have a look to see what they were doing. So ramping is obviously the best strategy. I continue to do my ramping up, and then I pass the turn over to them. The next turn I can play down the mini bots, and that will be relatively strong, especially into where they're going to only have 5 mana. They do get the crystal down, but I decide to play down my bots. And they were probably just deciding which spell that they wanted to use for that. I play down my Factory Assembler bot, and I also use the Innovate at this point in time as well to make sure that I'm getting as much value as I can, because I do know that Priest will be able to deal with this quite easily, this board. Obviously them both going face isn't the most ideal solution. I wanted to trade one of the 6/7s into the 3/4, but that's just sometimes how the draw ends up happening. you'll notice that my Blossom has ended up getting up to its upgraded amount, which means that I'll be gaining 10 armor with it. I'm also, knowing that I'm more than likely now playing against a Starship Priest, or a priest deck that does have a Manthal, I need to make sure that I'm getting what I need to out relatively quickly and easily. I do get Trail Mix here, but I end up making sure that I want to draw some cards, because once I use the 2 mana spells anyway, I can get up to 9 mana by doing this. Since I don't really have anything to play here, I do decide to draw 2 more cards. And then I'll end up refreshing my mana crystals. I'll use the Trail Mix, and I'll also be using the Blossom. So Blossom first to draw cards to see if there's anything that's useful for it, and then Trail Mix afterwards, since I didn't draw anything that's needed for it. So this is a turn that's just resetting up my field and my board position for them. They don't have too much at the moment, but they could get a Manthal out onto their board, which is something that I am considering and wondering about at this point in time. The most important thing is that I don't get too aggressive into the Manthal turn. I am making sure that I am taking out the opponent's board, but I'm also then making sure that I can use my refreshing mana crystals quite well. I don't want to make sure that I have too much stuff out here. So I do play down the Stargrazer, and then I use my Trail Mix to make sure that I can also deal some damage to the opponent as well. This following turn, I am thinking that it's going to be the Manthal turn, because they do have the 8 mana that's sitting there on their board. Yeah, so they end up playing the Manthal like I predicted, and then that will end up using it to take away the 2 minions that are there. This obviously plays quite well into the fact that I have Yogg in my hand, so I end up taking the Manthal with Yogg, and I am then going to be in a quite promising position, because they won't be able to use their Resurrect spell to be able to get it back over and over again. The only way they'd be able to deal with it is by using their Yogg, their Yogg to be able to take back control of it. They also, in this turn, don't get to use their Love Everlasting, so this means that they reduce down their ability to deal damage. I play down my Yogg here, and then I attack first, then take control of the Manthal, because I don't want my minions to lose. I don't want my minions to lose their ability to attack. And I just take the Ranger Gully there, because there wasn't really any other options that would be very useful for me. I'm at this point in time also looking at a Manthal to make sure to check what its last ability is, because I haven't used it too much in general. And what I end up doing is I'm thinking of how I'm going to use it to buff up. Him using Repackage means that I couldn't get the Zilliax, because I was going to go for the double Zilliax, because you could use it onto the Zilliax. So this turn I end up playing down my Assembler bot. I could play down the Ranger Gully, but I decided to just deal as much damage as I can to the opponent. And this puts me into a promising position, because the following turn they need to deal with my board, or I'll end up winning, because I have Zilliax as well to be able to take control of their minions. To take out one of their minions. They play down the Raden, and I'm not 100% sure what minions they've actually copied. I think it was just the crystal. And yeah, they end up conceding there. So them losing a Manthal and not being able to combo it out over and over means that they end up getting a lot weaker.